His black secretary was crying in the closet. What the Korean mafia boss did next will shock you. I pressed my tear-stained face against the expensive black suits hanging in Byung-suk Kim's private office closet, desperately trying to muffle my sobs with the fine Italian wool that probably cost more than my car. The rich fabric muffled the sound but couldn't stop the shaking of my shoulders or the hot tears that kept falling no matter how hard I tried to control them. I'd come in here to grab a file I'd misfiled earlier, and when the wave of panic and terror had hit me, when I'd gotten the second threatening text with a photo of Samira bound and blindfolded, I'd simply collapsed against his clothes and let myself break down where no one could see me. Except someone did see me. The closet door suddenly swung open, flooding me with harsh fluorescent light from his office that made me squeeze my eyes shut in pure mortification. I heard the sharp intake of breath, the sudden shift in energy that told me exactly who was standing there, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Kareen, standing in the doorway, filling the entire frame with his 6'3" presence that always made rooms feel smaller and infinitely more dangerous, was Byung-suk himself. The most feared Korean mafia boss in the city, the head of the Jokbo organization whose name alone made rival gangs reconsider their territories, the man whose schedule I managed with military precision, whose coffee I prepared every morning at exactly 7:15, whose world I'd been carefully navigating for 8 months without ever letting him see me as anything other than perfectly professional. His tattooed hand still held his phone, and I watched his expression shift from the lethal focus he'd been wearing when he'd opened the door, probably looking for a specific suit for tonight's meeting, to something I'd never seen cross his devastatingly sharp features before. Genuine, unfiltered concern. For 8 months, I, Kareen Wright, had maintained the perfect facade of the unshakable executive secretary, the woman who never flinched when bloodied men in expensive suits walked through our doors at odd hours, who never questioned the duffel bags of cash that mysteriously appeared in his office safe, who never asked about the terse phone calls in rapid Korean about shipments and territory disputes that clearly had nothing to do with legitimate business, who kept my eyes down and my hands steady even when his violent world pressed against the thin veneer of our corporate office like a beast testing the bars of its cage. I had been so careful, so meticulously composed, organizing his criminal empire with color-coded digital files and flawlessly timed appointments, keeping my inappropriate attraction to him buried so deep beneath perfectly tailored blouses and practiced smiles that I sometimes almost convinced myself those feelings didn't exist at all. I'd learned to school my features when he stood too close. I'd learned to keep my voice steady when he looked at me with those dark, penetrating eyes. I'd learned to pretend that working for him was just a job, that he was just my boss, that the tension I felt whenever he entered a room was just professional respect for someone powerful. But now, everything was shattering around me like crystal hitting concrete, and the one person I never wanted to see me vulnerable, the one person I'd worked so hard to maintain perfect professionalism with, was staring at me with an intensity that made my already racing heart threaten to explode right through my chest. "Kareen," he said again, and the way my name sounded in his deep, commanding voice, the same voice that issued death sentences over conference calls and made grown men nervous, made something inside me fracture even wider. Because there was a gentleness threading through it that seemed impossible, coming from a man who allegedly orchestrated the disappearance of an entire rival crew in a single night. He stepped into the closet, and suddenly the space that had felt like a refuge felt impossibly intimate. His broad shoulders, covered in that perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, seemed to take up all the oxygen. The tattoos that crept up his neck, intricate and beautiful and slightly terrifying, were at my eye level. I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that I'd never been close enough to identify before. He tucked his phone into his pocket with deliberate calm, then did something that shocked me into momentary stillness. He crouched down, lowering himself so we were at eye level, his movements careful and non-threatening despite the danger that radiated from him like heat. In this position, with the expensive suits hanging around us like curtains and the intimate space of the closet making everything feel surreal, I could see every detail of his face, the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his dark eyes, the way concern had softened features that were usually hard as stone. "What happened?" he asked quietly, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "Tell me what's wrong." The softness in his tone, so at odds with everything I knew about him, so different from the cold command he used with everyone else, broke something loose inside me. Maybe it was exhaustion from a sleepless night of panic. Maybe it was the terror that had been building since that first phone call this morning. Maybe it was 8 months of maintaining perfect professional distance finally cracking under the weight of real crisis. "It's nothing you need to worry about," I managed to whisper, reverting to formality even as my voice broke. "It's personal, it's my problem to handle, and I apologize for breaking down in your office during work hours. It was completely unprofessional, and it won't happen again." His jaw tightened, and I watched something shift in his expression. Not anger exactly, but something darker. Something that reminded me exactly who and what he was. Kareen, in the 8 months you've worked for me, you have never once been late, never once made an error, never once shown fear when violence walked through our doors. You've handled things that would make most people quit on their first day. He paused, his dark eyes searching my face with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through every wall I'd ever built. So when I find you hiding in my closet crying, I know it's not nothing, and I'd like to help if you'll let me. The offer was so unexpected, so genuine, that I felt my carefully constructed walls crumbling. This wasn't the cold mafia boss I'd been working for. This was someone different, someone I'd caught glimpses of in quiet moments but had never seen fully emerge. You can't help with this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No one can. Try me, he said simply. And there was something in those 2 words, some combination of confidence and sincerity, that made me believe he actually meant it. I took a shaky breath, weighing my options. I could lie, maintain the professional distance that had kept me safe for 8 months, and try to handle this impossible situation alone. Or I could tell the truth to the one person in this city who actually had the resources and connections to do something about it. My sister, I said finally, the words tumbling out in a rush. Samira. She was taken this morning, kidnapped. They called me and said my father owed them money before he died, and now they want me to pay $200,000 by tomorrow night, but I don't have that kind of money. I don't have anything close to that. Sok went very still, the kind of dangerous stillness that preceded violence. His hand, which had been resting casually on his knee, curled into a fist. Who took her? They said they were from the Kozlov syndicate. I choked out, and saying the name out loud made it all feel horribly real. They sent me a photo of her. She's blindfolded and tied up, and she looks so scared, and I don't know what to do. Kozlov, he repeated, and the name sounded like a death sentence in his mouth. He stood in one fluid motion, pulling his phone back out, and I scrambled to my feet as well, suddenly aware of how small the closet was with both of us standing. How long ago did they call? The first call was around 9 this morning. The photo came 20 minutes ago. I pulled out my own phone with shaking hands, showing him the image that had sent me spiraling into this closet. I've been trying to figure out what to do, how to get that kind of money, but I can't think straight, and He took my phone, studying the photo with an expression that made ice run down my spine. This was the man the underworld feared. This was the face he wore when someone made a fatal mistake. Come on, he said, his hand finding the small of my back and guiding me out of the closet. We're not having this conversation in here. He led me to the leather couch in his office, the same one where I'd sat countless times taking notes during meetings, but everything felt different now. He was different, or maybe I was just seeing a side of him that had always been there but hidden beneath layers of professional distance. Sok made a call, speaking in rapid Korean, his tone clipped and commanding. I caught my own name and what I assumed was Kozlov's, but the rest was too fast for me to follow. When he ended the call, he sat down beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him but not quite touching. Tell me everything they said, every detail you remember, no matter how small. I recounted both phone calls as best I could through the tightness in my throat. The mechanical voice that had told me about the debt, the amount they wanted, the deadline, the warning not to go to the police. Then the photo, sent without words, just that horrible image of Samira that made my stomach turn. Sok listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, and I watched him process the information with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. Your father has been dead for 3 years, he said finally. If Kozlov had a legitimate debt to collect, he would have come after your family within months, not years. The interest alone would have motivated faster action. So what does that mean? It means this isn't really about a debt, it's about leverage. He pulled out his phone again. Kozlov has been testing boundaries with the Jokbo for months, looking for weaknesses, trying to expand into our territory. Taking your sister and fabricating a debt claim gives him an excuse to make demands. The clinical way he analyzed it helped somehow, made the situation feel less like random chaos and more like a problem that could be solved. What kind of demands? That depends on what he thinks he can get away with. He stood and moved to his desk, pulling up something on his computer. But first, we need to find out where he's holding her and confirm she's actually unharmed. How long will that take? A few hours. Maybe less. I have people who specialize in this kind of intelligence gathering. He made another call, this one in English. Hyung Nim, I need you at the office now. We have a situation. A pause. Kozlov took someone. I'll brief you when you get here. When he ended the call, I realized I was shaking, not just my hands, but my whole body. the adrenaline and fear finally catching up with me now that I'd told someone, now that the secret wasn't mine alone anymore. You're going into shock, Sok observed, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. When did you last eat? I couldn't remember. Breakfast, maybe? Everything before the first phone call felt like it had happened to someone else. That's what I thought. He moved to a cabinet near his desk and pulled out a bottle of water, twisting it open and handing it to me. Drink this, all of it, then we're leaving. Leaving? I took the water automatically, my hands still trembling. Your apartment isn't safe. If Kozlov knows enough about your family to fabricate this debt claim, he knows where you live. You're not going back there until this is resolved. He said it like it was already decided, but then added, unless you have somewhere else you'd prefer to stay? I didn't. My friends were scattered across the city, none of them close enough that I'd feel comfortable dragging them into this. And the thought of being alone in my apartment, jumping at every sound, waiting for another threatening call, made my chest tight with panic. Where would I go? I asked quietly. My penthouse. It's the most secure location in the city, and I can coordinate everything from there. He must have seen the hesitation on my face because he continued. You'll have your own room, your own space. This is about keeping you safe while we get your sister back, nothing more. The clarification should have been reassuring, but part of me wondered why he needed to make it at all. Why are you doing this? I'm just your secretary. You don't owe me anything beyond my paycheck. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. You've worked for me for 8 months. You've seen things that would send most people running, and you never flinched. You've earned my respect, Karine. And when someone I respect is in trouble, I help them. It's that simple. It wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was practical, straightforward, exactly what I would have expected from him, and somehow that made it mean more. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of his armored SUV, watching the city blur past tinted windows as we headed to a part of town I'd never been to. Sok sat beside me, his phone constantly buzzing with messages he answered in terse Korean. His driver, a man with the same neck tattoos that marked Sok as Yokbo, navigated through traffic with practiced efficiency. We'll get her back, Sok said suddenly, looking up from his phone. I promise you that, Karine. Your sister will be home safe. I wanted to believe him. Sitting in his car, surrounded by his world, watching him coordinate what I was beginning to realize was a significant operation, I found that I did believe him. What happens after, I asked. After she's safe? After you decide if you still want to work for me, knowing that being in my orbit comes with risks like this. His expression was serious. I won't hold it against you if you walk away. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. And if I don't walk away, then we'll deal with that when we get there, he said. And something in his tone made my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Sok's penthouse wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined cold minimalism, all black and chrome and sharp edges that matched his reputation. Instead, I stepped out of the private elevator into a space that felt almost warm. The western wall was entirely glass, offering a stunning view of the city skyline, but the interior held touches of personality I'd never anticipated. Low, comfortable furniture arranged in conversation areas, Korean art on the walls, traditional ink landscapes that spoke of heritage. A shelf near the kitchen displaying handmade pottery, each piece unique. I didn't expect this, I admitted, turning slowly to take it all in. What did you expect? He shrugged out of his suit jacket, draping it over a chair, and I tried not to stare at how the movement revealed more of the tattoos covering his arms. Something harsher, less like a home. The office is for business. For showing strength. He moved to the kitchen with easy familiarity. This is where I remember who I am beyond the organization. I watched him fill a kettle with water, his movements practiced and precise. It was surreal, seeing this dangerous man doing something so domestic, so normal. Sit, he said, gesturing to the kitchen island. You need to eat something, and we should talk about the plan. I slid onto one of the bar stools, still clutching the water bottle he'd given me at the office. My phone sat on the counter between us, silent but threatening, waiting for another message that would make everything worse. He worked in comfortable silence, brewing tea that smelled nutty and slightly sweet, then pulling ingredients from his refrigerator. Rice, eggs, vegetables, strips of marinated beef. Within minutes, he had a pan heating on the stove, the sizzle and pop of cooking filling the quiet space. You cook, I said, unable to hide my surprise. My mother taught me before she died. His voice carried a weight that suggested old pain, carefully managed. She said a man who couldn't feed himself would always be at someone else's mercy. How old were you when she died? 17. He cracked eggs into the rice with practiced efficiency. Wrong place, wrong time. Caught in someone else's territorial dispute. The parallel to my own situation wasn't lost on me. Is that why you do this? Why you run the joke bow? Partly. When someone you love dies because you're powerless to protect them, you start thinking a lot about power. He plated fried rice topped with a perfectly cooked egg and set it in front of me. Eat. Then we'll talk strategy. The food was incredible. Savory and comforting and exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. I ate while he prepared his own plate, and for a few minutes, we just existed in this strange domestic bubble while my sister was out there somewhere scared and alone. I've had 3 people confirm Kozlov's holding her in a warehouse on the east side, BM Sok said, breaking the silence. She's alive and appears unharmed in the surveillance footage we managed to access. Relief hit me so hard I nearly choked on my food. She's okay? For now. Kozlov's smart enough to know that damaged leverage is worthless. He pulled up something on his phone, showing me grainy footage of what looked like a large room. I couldn't make out much, but knowing someone had eyes on the location made me feel slightly less helpless. So what do we do? Do I try to get the money? Do we negotiate? We don't negotiate with people who take hostages, he said flatly. We get her out, tonight. Tonight, my heart raced. How? I'm working on the details, but the basic plan is an extraction. My team goes in, secures your sister, and gets her out before Kozlov can react. He set down his chopsticks. It's risky, but it's cleaner than trying to meet his demands, which would likely just lead to him asking for more. The thought of armed men storming a warehouse to rescue Samira should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a desperate hope blooming in my chest. What do you need from me? Nothing tonight. You stay here where it's safe, and you let my people do what they do best. He reached across the counter, his hand covering mine. The contact was warm, grounding. I know waiting is the hardest part, but I need you to trust me on this. I do trust you, I said, and realized I meant it. I don't know why exactly, but I do. Something shifted in his expression, his dark eyes searching my face. You shouldn't. Trust me, I'm not a good man, Karine. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. Maybe, I said softly, but you're also the man who's dropping everything to help me get my sister back, who's keeping me safe, who just cooked me dinner because you noticed I was shaking. I turned my hand over beneath his, our palms pressing together. So maybe you're not as bad as you think you are. Or maybe you're not as good at reading people as you think you are, he countered, but there was no heat in it, just a kind of resigned honesty. Then I guess I'm about to find out. We stayed like that for a moment, hands clasped on the counter, the city lights glittering behind him through the massive windows. The air between us felt charged, heavy with something I didn't want to name yet but couldn't ignore. You should rest, he said finally, but he didn't pull his hand away. It's going to be a long night, and you need to sleep if you can. I don't think I can sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that photo of her. Then don't close your eyes yet. He stood, moving around the counter to stand beside me, and suddenly we were much closer than professional distance allowed. Talk to me instead. Tell me something about Samira that isn't about this crisis. Something that makes you smile. The request surprised me, the gentleness of it. She's studying to be a veterinarian, always loved animals more than people. When she was little, she'd bring home every stray she could find, and I'd have to explain why we couldn't keep them all. You raised her, he observed, after your mother died. Someone had to. Dad tried, but he was drowning in his own grief. I smiled despite everything. She used to draw me pictures of the animals she'd save someday, kept them all in a folder she called her future patients. She sounds strong, like her sister. I'm not strong, I said. I'm terrified right now. Strength isn't the absence of fear, Karine. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. His hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture so unexpected, so tender, that my breath caught. You came to work today even though your world was falling apart. You held it together until you couldn't anymore. That's strength. I looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous man who'd somehow become my lifeline in the span of a few hours, and something shifted between us. The air grew thicker, charged with an awareness that had been building for months beneath professional politeness. "Biam Sok," I whispered, not even sure what I was asking for, but he seemed to understand anyway. He leaned down slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, and when I didn't, when I actually leaned closer, his lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle and careful and absolutely devastating. The warmth of his mouth, the barely restrained intensity in the way his hands slid into my hair, the way my entire body seemed to light up at the contact. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing harder than we should be from just one kiss. "That was probably a mistake," he said quietly. "Probably," I agreed, but I didn't move away, and neither did he. You're vulnerable right now. In crisis. I shouldn't take advantage of that. You're not, I said firmly. His eyes darkened, heat flaring in them that made my pulse race. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back to how things were. I don't want to go back, I whispered. He kissed me again, deeper this time, less careful, and I kissed him back with equal intensity. 8 months of buried attraction finally breaking free. His hands framed my face, and I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, needing the contact, needing the distraction, needing him. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. I have calls to make, plans to finalize. But Kareen, we're going to finish this conversation after your sister is safe. I nodded. I honestly didn't think I'd sleep, but exhaustion pulled me under sometime around midnight. When I woke, pale sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows, and for a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. Samira, Kozlov, Biomsok's kiss. I found him in his home office, looking like he hadn't slept at all. Multiple monitors displayed surveillance feeds and building schematics, and he was speaking in low, rapid Korean into his phone. When he saw me in the doorway, he ended the call immediately. Coffee's in the kitchen, he said, his voice rougher than usual from lack of sleep. We move in 3 hours. My heart jumped. 3 hours? Kozlov's guard rotation changes at 2, that's our window. My team will breach from 2 entry points simultaneously, secure your sister, and extract before he can mobilize a response. He pulled up a schematic on one of the monitors. Jun-So will lead the extraction team. He's the best I have. I moved closer, studying the building layout he was showing me, trying to make sense of the tactical markers and notations. And me? What do? You stay here. You stay safe. And you wait for me to bring your sister home. The thought of sitting in his penthouse while other people risked their lives for Samira made me feel useless, but I understood the logic. I'd only be a liability in an operation like this. Okay, I said quietly. I'll wait. He stood and crossed to me, his hands settling on my shoulders. She's going to be fine. This is what my people do. They're trained for exactly this kind of extraction. I know. I just hate feeling helpless. You're not helpless. You trusted me enough to let me help. That took courage. His thumb brushed my collarbone in a gesture that felt unconscious, intimate. Now you need to trust that we'll finish this. I nodded, trying to absorb his certainty, his calm. He leaned down and pressed a quick kiss to my forehead, then stepped back like he'd surprised himself with the gesture. Get some breakfast. Try to distract yourself. I'll update you as soon as we have movement. The next 3 hours were the longest of my life. I showered, changed into clothes that had been delivered from my apartment, and attempted to eat toast that tasted like cardboard. I tried reading, tried watching television, tried anything to make time move faster. Nothing worked. At exactly 2:15, my phone rang. Biomsok. We have her, he said without preamble. Extraction was clean, no casualties on our side. Jun-So is bringing her to a medical facility now for evaluation. I actually sobbed with relief, my legs going weak. Is she hurt? Scared but physically fine from what Jun-So reports. I'm heading to the facility now. I'll send a car for you. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of an SUV being driven by the same tattooed man who'd driven us to the penthouse. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Samira was safe. After 2 days of terror, she was actually safe. The medical facility was discreet and professional, nothing like a regular hospital. Dr. Park met me at the elevator, her expression calm and reassuring. Your sister's in room 3, physically unharmed. We've given her a mild sedative for anxiety, but she's been asking for you constantly. I barely heard the rest of what she said. I was already moving toward the room, my heart pounding. When I pushed open the door, Samira was sitting on the edge of the bed in oversized scrubs, and when she saw me, her face crumpled completely. Kareen! We collided in the middle of the room, both of us crying, holding each other so tightly I could barely breathe. She was shaking, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of trauma, and I couldn't stop touching her hair, her face, confirming she was real and whole and here. I've got you, I whispered through my tears. You're safe now. I've got you. I was so scared. She sobbed into my shoulder. I thought I'd never see you again. They just grabbed me and I couldn't see anything and I didn't know where they were taking me or what they were going to do. I know, baby, I know. But it's over now. We held each other for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Eventually her sobs quieted to hiccups and she pulled back enough to look at my face properly. How did you find me? How did you get me out? She asked, her voice hoarse from crying. That's complicated, I said, guiding her back to sit on the bed. But the short version is my boss has resources I didn't fully understand until now. Your boss. Her eyes were already starting to droop from the sedative. The men who rescued me, they were so professional, like a real team. Before I could figure out how to explain, there was a soft knock on the door. Byung-sok entered cautiously, and I saw Samira's eyes widen slightly, though exhaustion was clearly winning the battle for her attention. "Samira," he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard in the office. "I'm glad you're safe. I apologize for what you went through." "You got me out," Samira said, her words starting to slur slightly. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me." He looked at me. "The sedative will help her sleep. She needs rest more than anything right now." As if on cue, Samira's eyes fluttered closed, then opened again with visible effort. "Karine, don't leave." "I won't," I promised, squeezing her hand. "I'll be right here." Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep. I stayed on the edge of the bed, still holding her hand, unable to let go just yet. Byung-sok moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. "She's safe now. Kozlov won't be a problem anymore." "What does that mean?" I asked quietly, not looking away from Samira's sleeping face. "It means he's been dealt with. The situation is resolved." His hand found my shoulder, warm and grounding. "You should get some rest too. You've been running on adrenaline for 2 days. I can't leave her yet. Then I'll have a cot brought in. But Karine, she's going to sleep for hours. The sedative they gave her is strong." He crouched down so we were at eye level, let the doctor monitor her. "Come back to the penthouse, sleep properly, and we'll return first thing in the morning." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with me too. And he was right. Samira was safe here, probably safer than anywhere else in the city. "Okay," I whispered. "But if anything changes, if she wakes up and needs me, they'll call immediately, I promise." I kissed Samira's forehead and followed Byung-sok out of the room, my body finally understanding that the crisis was over, that I could stop running on pure fear and adrenaline. In the elevator, the weight of everything that had happened in the past 48 hours crashed over me all at once. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "For getting her back, for keeping me safe, for everything." "You don't need to thank me," he said, but his hand found mine, fingers interlacing in a grip that felt like more than just comfort. The ride back to the penthouse was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I watched the city pass by through the tinted windows, everything looking different now that the immediate crisis was over. Samira was safe. Kozlov had been dealt with. The nightmare that had consumed the past 2 days was actually finished. So why did I still feel like I was falling apart? When we stepped into the penthouse, the space felt different than it had this morning, less like a safe house during a crisis and more like a place where I'd have to confront everything I'd been too terrified to think about while Samira was in danger. "You should eat something," Byung-sok said, moving toward the kitchen. "And then sleep. Real sleep. Not the few hours you managed last night. I don't think I can eat." My stomach was still in knots, my body unable to accept that the threat was actually over. He turned to face me fully, studying me with that intense attention that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "You're crashing. The adrenaline's wearing off and your body doesn't know what to do with the sudden absence of immediate danger. Is that what this is?" I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the comfortable temperature, because I feel like I'm going to shake apart. "Come here," he said. And when I hesitated, he crossed the distance between us instead. His arms came around me, pulling me against his chest, and I let myself collapse into him, let myself finally stop holding everything together. I didn't cry exactly. I'd cried enough in that hospital room with Samira. This was something else, a full-body trembling that I couldn't control, the accumulated terror of 2 days finally expressing itself now that it was safe to fall apart. Byung-sok held me through it, one hand rubbing slow circles on my back, his chin resting on top of my head. He didn't tell me it was okay or that everything would be fine. He just held me and let me shake, solid and steady, while I came undone. Eventually, the trembling subsided. I pulled back slightly, embarrassed by the damp spot my tears had left on his shirt. "Sorry," I mumbled. "Don't be." His hands moved to frame my face, thumbs brushing away the moisture on my cheeks. "You held yourself together through an impossible situation. You're allowed to fall apart now that it's over." "Is it really over?" I asked. "Kozlov, the threat, all of it? It's over," he confirmed. "Kozlov won't be making any more moves against the Jokbo or anyone connected to us. You and Samira are safe." The certainty in his voice made me believe him, but it also reminded me of exactly who and what he was. Whatever had been dealt with regarding Kozlov, I didn't think it involved a stern conversation and a handshake agreement. "I don't want to know the details, do I?" I said quietly. "No," he agreed. "You don't." I should have been disturbed by that, Should have been questioning what I was getting myself into with this man. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of gratitude and something darker. Something that recognized the necessity of violence in protecting the people he cared about. "I'm not a good person for you," Sok said, as if reading my thoughts. "Last night, I kissed you when you were vulnerable and scared. That wasn't fair to you. You asked me first. You gave me every chance to pull away. You were in crisis. You weren't thinking clearly." His hands dropped from my face, and he took a step back, putting distance between us. "Now that Samira is safe, now that the immediate threat is gone, you need space to figure out what you actually want versus what you thought you wanted in the middle of a nightmare." The rational part of me knew he was right. The part that had been fighting inappropriate feelings for my boss for 8 months, that had tried to maintain professional boundaries, agreed that space and clarity were necessary. But another part of me, the part that had felt something shift between us in that closet, that had kissed him back last night with 8 months of buried attraction finally breaking free, didn't want space at all. "What if I already know what I want?" I asked. "Then it'll still be true in a few days, after you've had time to process everything." He moved back to the kitchen, putting the island between us like a physical barrier. "I'm not going anywhere, Kareen, but I need you to be sure to make this choice when you're not running on fear and relief and gratitude. So what happens now? Now, you take the guest room and get some actual sleep. Tomorrow, we'll go see Samira together, make sure she's settling in okay. I've arranged a new apartment for her in a secure building, somewhere Kozlov's people don't know about." He pulled out his phone, checking something. "After that, you decide what you want. If you want to keep working for me, if you want to walk away, if you want to explore whatever this is between us, all of it is your choice." The fact that he was giving me options, that he wasn't using the fact that he'd rescued Samira as leverage, made my chest tight with something I wasn't ready to name yet. "I don't want to walk away," I said quietly. "From the job or from you, I know that much." Something flashed in his eyes, heat and satisfaction and carefully restrained want. "Good, that's good to know. But Kareen, I still need you to take some time. Go to your apartment tomorrow after we see Samira. Spend a few days in your own space. Come back to work next week with clear eyes and a clear head. Then we'll talk about what comes next." "You're really good at self-restraint," I observed, trying to inject some lightness into the heavy conversation. "I've had a lot of practice." His lips quirked in something almost like a smile. "But you make it significantly harder." The admission sent warmth through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Okay, I'll take a few days, process everything, figure out what I'm actually feeling versus what's just crisis hormones." "Thank you," he said, and I could see the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. "Now, please, try to eat something, even just toast, and then sleep. You look like you're about to fall over." He wasn't wrong. Now that the adrenaline had fully drained away, exhaustion was hitting me like a physical weight. I managed half a piece of toast and some tea before I had to admit defeat. "Guest room is the second door on the left," Sok said. "Everything you need should be in there. If you need anything else, I'll be in my office making sure all the loose ends are tied up." I nodded and headed toward the guest room, but paused at the hallway entrance. "Sok?" He looked up from his phone. "Yes, thank you for everything. I mean it. I know you do." His expression softened. "Sleep well, Kareen. Tomorrow, everything will look clearer." I hoped he was right. But as I closed the guest room door behind me and crawled into the bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be quite as clear or simple as it had been before I'd found myself crying in his closet 2 days ago. Everything had changed. The only question now was whether that change would lead somewhere worth the risk, or if I was making the biggest mistake of my life by falling for a man whose world was built on violence and power. I fell asleep before I could find an answer. 4 days later, I stood outside the office building where I'd worked for 8 months, feeling like a stranger returning to familiar territory. Everything looked the same. The revolving doors, the marble lobby, the elevator that would take me to the top floor where Sok's office occupied the entire east wing. But I felt fundamentally different, and I wasn't sure how to reconcile the person I'd been with, the person I was becoming. I'd spent the past few days with Samira, helping her settle into the new apartment Sok had arranged. It was beautiful and secure, in a building with actual security personnel who nodded respectfully when I entered. My sister had been quiet, processing her trauma in ways I recognized from my own experience losing our mother. We'd talked, cried, and slowly started rebuilding our sense of safety. Sok had checked in daily with brief texts. "How is she doing? And let me know if you need anything." Professional, respectful of the space he'd insisted I take. But I'd caught myself reading those messages multiple times, looking for subtext that might not exist. Now, returning to work felt like stepping into unknown territory. What would it be like to see him again? To navigate the professional relationship that had always hidden an undercurrent of attraction? To exist in the same space knowing he'd kissed me, knowing I'd kissed him back, knowing we'd agreed to explore whatever this was between us. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual. When I stepped into the reception area, Minji, the other secretary who handled the legitimate business side of operations, looked up with genuine surprise. "Kareen, we didn't expect you back until next week." She stood, coming around her desk. "How are you? How's your sister?" "We're okay," I said, appreciating that she didn't ask for details she probably already knew. In Byung-suk's world, information traveled quickly among trusted people. I needed to get back to routine. "He's in his office, he'll be glad you're here." I knocked on the door I'd walked through countless times, suddenly nervous in a way I'd never been before. "Come in." Byung-suk looked up from his computer, and I watched surprise register on his face before it smoothed into something more controlled. He stood, closing his laptop. "Kareen, I didn't expect you today." "I know. You said next week, but I needed to come back." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Sitting at home was making me crazy. "How's Samira?" "Better. Still processing everything, but she's strong. The apartment you arranged is perfect. Thank you for that." "It's the least I could do." He gestured to the couch rather than the formal chairs, and I sat, hyper-aware of the last time we'd sat here together. When I'd told him about the kidnapping, when everything had started to change, he sat beside me, maintaining careful distance that felt deliberate. "Are you sure you're ready to be back? There's no pressure." "Kareen, take all the time you need. I'm sure. I need normal. I need routine." I met his eyes directly. "I need to figure out how to do this. Work for you, be around you, navigate whatever this is between us, without letting it interfere with the job." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, a nervous gesture I immediately regretted. "You were right." I needed space to think clearly, to separate gratitude from actual feelings. Something shifted in his expression, interest sharpening his gaze. "And what did you figure out?" "That I'm terrible at self-deception." I managed a small smile. "I tried convincing myself that what I feel is just gratitude, just relief that Samira's safe, just the intensity of crisis creating false intimacy. But Byung-suk, I've felt this way for months. Since long before Kozlov and kidnapping and midnight rescues, the crisis just made it impossible to ignore." He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with that intensity that made me feel stripped bare. "I've felt the same way, longer than I probably should have, longer than was appropriate for an employer. So what do we do about it?" "We take it slow," he said. "We figure out how to navigate a personal relationship alongside a professional one. We don't rush into anything just because the crisis made everything feel urgent and immediate." "That's very mature and sensible of you." His lips quirked slightly. "I have my moments." The tension between us was palpable, that same charged awareness from the night he'd kissed me in his kitchen. But this time, we both held back, both respecting the boundary we'd agreed to establish. "I should let you get back to work," I said, standing. "I have 8 days of emails to catch up on, and I'm sure the schedule is chaos. Actually, I had Minji handle most of the urgent items. I didn't want you coming back to complete disaster." He stood as well. "But yes, there are a few things that need your attention. The Nakamura meeting got rescheduled, and there's a new deal in negotiation that you'll need to coordinate." Just like that, we slipped back into professional mode. He outlined what I'd missed. I took notes on my phone, and for a few minutes, it almost felt like before. Like nothing had changed, except everything had changed, and we both knew it. "Kareen," he said as I headed for the door, "I'm glad you're back. The office wasn't the same without you." I looked back at him, seeing past the controlled expression to the genuine sentiment beneath. "I'm glad to be back." As I settled into my desk outside his office, diving into emails and calendar coordination, I felt something settle inside me. This could work. We could navigate the professional and the personal, could take things slowly and figure out what this thing between us actually meant. The real question was whether slow and careful would be enough, or if the attraction that had been building for 8 months would inevitably pull us into something we weren't prepared for. Only time would tell. Flowers appeared on my desk on Tuesday morning. Not a massive bouquet, nothing ostentatious that would draw attention from Minji or the stream of business associates who passed through the office. Just a simple arrangement of white orchids in a sleek ceramic vase with a small card that read, "These reminded me of you. B." I touched one of the delicate petals, something warm blooming in my chest. He remembered. 3 weeks ago, before everything happened with Samira, I'd mentioned in passing that I loved orchids but could never keep them alive in my apartment. "Those are beautiful," Minji said, pausing by my desk. "Special occasion?" "Just a friend being thoughtful," I said. but I caught myself smiling as I positioned the vase where I could see it while I worked. Later that morning, Byung-sok emerged from his office for a meeting, and as he passed my desk, his fingers brushed the back of my chair, so lightly I might have imagined it. But when I looked up, I caught the slight curve of his lips before he schooled his expression back to professional neutrality. The gestures continued throughout the week. Small things that anyone else might miss but that felt significant to me. The way he'd started bringing 2 coffee cups when he returned from meetings, always remembering that I took mine with cream and no sugar. The email he sent at midnight with an article about veterinary school scholarships. A simple thought Samira might be interested in the subject line. The fact that he somehow always knew when I'd worked through lunch and would order extra from wherever he was getting food, leaving containers on my desk without comment. "You're spoiling me," I said Friday afternoon when I found him in the break room making tea. He learned I preferred it in the late afternoon when coffee made me jittery. "I'm taking care of someone I care about," he corrected, handing me the cup. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I leaned against the counter, cradling the warm ceramic. "Because it feels a lot like spoiling." "Then maybe you should get used to being spoiled." His dark eyes held mine, and I saw warmth there that made my pulse quicken. "I don't do anything halfway, Karine, especially not when it comes to people who matter to me." "I matter to you," I said softly, testing the words. "You matter to me," he confirmed, and the simplicity of it, the complete lack of pretense, made my heart skip. The following week, he started staying later, timing his departure with mine even though I knew he used to work until midnight most nights. We'd ride the elevator down together, and he'd walk me to my car in the parking garage, his presence a quiet protection I'd grown to appreciate. "You don't have to do this every night," I said Thursday evening as we walked through the concrete structure. "I know you have work to finish. I can finish it from home, and I'd rather make sure you get to your car safely." He paused by my driver's door, hands in his pockets. "Humor me. You're very protective. Only of things I care about." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Drive safe. Text me when you're home." I did every night. Simple messages, "home safe," followed by his response, "good, sleep well." It was such a small thing, but it made me feel cherished in a way I'd never experienced before. On Friday, I arrived to find a package on my desk. Inside was a book I'd mentioned wanting to read months ago, something I'd been surprised he remembered at all. The note inside read, "For the weekend, though I hope you'll also make time to rest. B." I found him in his office, and for once, I didn't knock. I just walked in and crossed to his desk, where he looked up with raised eyebrows. "Thank you," I said, "for the book, for the flowers, for the tea and the late-night articles and walking me to my car. For all of it." He stood, coming around the desk. "You don't need to thank me. I want to." I stepped closer, drawn by something I was tired of resisting. "Byung-sok, this slow approach, taking time to figure things out. It's smart. It's the right thing to do. But I need you to know that every day, I'm more sure about this, about you." Something heated in his expression, and his hand came up to cup my cheek. "Every day, I have to remind myself not to rush you, not to push for more when you're still processing everything that happened." "What if I'm done processing?" I asked, my heart racing. "What if I'm ready for more?" "Are you?" His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Because once we cross certain lines, Karine, there's no going back. I don't want to go back." He leaned down slowly, giving me every chance to change my mind, and when his lips met mine, it was different from that first desperate kiss in his penthouse. This was softer, sweeter, full of promise rather than urgency. His hand slid into my hair, and I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, his forehead rested against mine. "We're really doing this," he murmured. "We're really doing this," I confirmed. And for the first time since that day in the closet, everything felt exactly right. The shift in our relationship was subtle but undeniable. We still maintained professionalism at the office, but now there were stolen moments that made my pulse race. His hand at the small of my back lasting a beat too long when we passed in the hallway. The way his eyes tracked me across the room during meetings. The text messages that had evolved from purely work-related to something more. "Dinner tonight?" he texted that afternoon. "My place. I'll cook." Which was how I found myself standing in his penthouse kitchen 3 weeks after we'd kissed in his office, watching him move with practiced ease between the stove and counter. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a fitted black shirt that showed off the tattoos on his arms, and I was trying very hard not to stare. "You're quiet," he observed, glancing over his shoulder with a slight smile. "What are you thinking about?" "How domestic this is," I admitted, "considering who you are and what you do. I'm allowed to be more than one thing." He plated the stir-fry he'd been making, carrying both dishes to the dining table. At work, I'm the boss. Here, with you, I get to just be Byung-sok. We ate dinner talking about everything and nothing. Samira's progress in her therapy sessions, a book I was reading, his mother's recipe that he'd modified for the stir-fry. It felt normal and easy and right in a way that should have terrified me but instead just made me want more. After dinner, he pulled me to the couch, and I settled against his side naturally, his arm around my shoulders. We'd done this a few times now, these quiet evenings where we just existed together, but tonight felt different, charged with something that had been building for weeks. "Karine," he said softly, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. "Tell me if I'm moving too fast." "You're not," I assured him, tilting my head to look up at him. "If anything, your self-control is impressive." His eyes darkened. "You have no idea how much self-control I'm exercising right now." "Show me," I challenged, my heart racing. He didn't need to be asked twice. His mouth found mine in a kiss that was deeper, hungrier than the careful ones we'd shared before. His hand slid into my hair, angling my head exactly where he wanted it, and I made a sound that would have embarrassed me if I'd had the capacity to care. "Karine," he murmured against my lips, his voice rough. "We should slow down." "Why?" I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "We've been slow. We've been careful. I'm tired of being careful." Something shifted in his expression, restraint giving way to want. He kissed me again, and this time his hands moved with more purpose, sliding down my sides, pulling me closer until I was practically in his lap. I went willingly, straddling his thighs, and felt his sharp intake of breath when I settled against him. His hands gripped my hips, holding me still. "If we keep going, I won't want to stop." "Then don't stop," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Byung-sok, I want this. I want you." He groaned, his forehead dropping to rest against mine. "You're going to be the death of me. Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, he stood in one fluid motion, taking me with him. My legs wrapped around his waist instinctively as he carried me toward his bedroom, and I couldn't help but laugh at the casual display of strength. "Something funny?" he asked, but there was warmth in his voice. "Just thinking about how I used to try so hard to maintain professional distance from you," I admitted. How I'd lecture myself about inappropriate workplace attractions. And now I'm very glad I failed at that. I kissed the side of his neck, feeling his pulse jump beneath my lips. He laid me down on his bed with surprising gentleness, following me down to cage me in with his arms. His dark eyes searched my face one more time, making sure. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. I pulled him down for a kiss that left no doubt about my answer. Not a chance. And as his mouth found mine again, as his hands started exploring with purposeful intent, I knew that whatever came next, whatever complications arose from loving a man like Byung-sok Kim, this moment was exactly where I was meant to be. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the warmth of Byung-sok's arm draped across my waist. His chest was pressed against my back, and I lay there quietly, savoring the peaceful moment before the day demanded our attention. "Good morning." His voice rumbled near my ear, still rough with sleep. "Morning." I turned in his arms to face him, taking in his relaxed expression and the way his hair fell across his forehead. "What time is it?" "Early enough that we don't have to rush." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "Coffee? You're offering to make me coffee? In bed?" "I'm offering to make coffee. Whether you drink it in bed or at the counter is up to you." His lips curved into that slight smile I'd come to know well. We ended up at the kitchen counter, both wrapped in comfortable clothes, drinking coffee and stealing kisses between sips. It felt easy and natural, like we'd been doing this for years instead of just beginning. "I should go home eventually," I said without much conviction. "Change clothes? Check on Samira." "Or," he countered, "you could stay, and I'll send someone to get whatever you need." "You really hate letting me out of your sight, don't you?" "Only when I have better alternatives." He pulled me closer. "Stay." So I stayed. 4 months later, I stood in Byung-sok's penthouse adjusting the emerald green dress Samira had insisted I buy. She'd been oddly enthusiastic about tonight's dinner, even helping me choose accessories and making sure my hair was perfect. "Just dinner at home," I muttered to my reflection, wondering why I felt so nervous. "You look beautiful," Byung-sok said from the doorway, and the appreciation in his eyes settled some of my nerves. "You're very dressed up for takeout," I observed, noting his perfectly tailored suit. "Who said anything about takeout?" He offered his hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led me to the rooftop, a space I hadn't explored before. When the door opened, I stopped in surprise. String lights created a canopy overhead, casting a warm glow over a small table set with candles and white orchids. The city stretched out around us, and soft music played from somewhere I couldn't see. "You did all this?" "I had help," he admitted, guiding me to the table. "But the idea was mine. Dinner was perfect. My favorite dishes, easy conversation, the comfortable rhythm we'd developed over months of being together. We laughed about Junso's terrible attempt at flirting with the new accountant, discussed Samira's excitement about her veterinary school acceptance, and debated whether his mother's recipe was actually better than the restaurant version. After dessert, he stood and extended his hand. "Dance with me?" The music shifted to something slower as he pulled me close. We swayed together, and I rested my head against his chest. Content. "Karine," he said quietly, "these past 4 months have been the best of my life." I lifted my head to look at him. "Mine too. You walked into my world and made everything better. You see all of me and you chose to stay." He stepped back, and I watched in surprise as he lowered himself to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between us, and I felt joy bubble up in my chest, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," I said, smiling so wide my face hurt. "Absolutely yes." He stood smoothly, sliding the ring onto my finger before kissing me. When we pulled apart, we were both grinning like complete fools. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too." I looked down at the ring, then back up at his face. "Even though you're impossible sometimes." "Especially because I'm impossible," he corrected, and I laughed. We stood there holding each other as the city lights sparkled around us. 8 months ago, I'd been just his secretary, carefully maintaining professional distance and pretending I didn't feel the pull between us. Now I was engaged to the city's most powerful and dangerous man, and somehow that felt exactly right. "So," I said, pressing closer to him, "how do you want to celebrate?" His smile turned warm. "I have a few ideas." "Show me," I challenged. He swept me up easily, carrying me back inside as I laughed against his shoulder. Whatever came next, whatever challenges his world brought, we'd face them together. And that was more than enough. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.